Really delighted to have two guest speakers with us. Karen Burke from Microsoft is going to be doing the slot just after me, so you'll be with her in just the next couple of minutes. And myself and Cathnia. Cathnia is the principal at Colaiste, Pobail, Osraí, and a really good guy to give a perspective of a school leadership point of view and how they've introduced change across different areas as well. So we'll speak with Cathnia, who's working with us at Nurture as well in a few moments after Karen. What I'm going to do now is just kind of give a very quick background in terms of who we are at jumpAgrades. The one other person that you'll hear from today is Stephen Comiskey, who is our Director of Teaching and Learning at Nurture. Maybe before I go any further as well, and just introduce myself, I'm Dave Neville, the co-founder and CEO of Nurture, with my co-founder Burke, who's on the line here as well. We started jumpAgrades in 2017, so some of you may have come across that name before. jumpAgrades was kind of, it's a support for students outside the classroom and targeting those students from less fortunate backgrounds. And Nurture was born out of jumpAgrades. All the research framework that we put together, the best practices that we learned over those number of years is what led to Nurture. So just very quickly to touch on the agenda that we're going to cover here today. So the education transformation framework, why this matters to leadership, and that student-centered learning feedback and that school and student process. This is all looking at that from a Microsoft perspective, and Karen's going to take us through that. Afterwards, I'll be having a discussion with Cathnia and looking at empowering teachers to deeply care for their students and looking at introducing change from past success stories into looking forward as well. Cathnia Ó Muircheartaigh, he's a past president of the NAPD and also the principal at Coláiste, Pobail, Osraí as well. And lastly, I'll hand over to Stephen Comiskey, who'll be looking at the overall area of digitizing formative assessment and feedback. So some of the best practices of feedback that teachers may be aware of, some, not all, but also looking at how they're built into Nurture and giving you a quick demonstration of how that looks within Microsoft Teams. That's what we'll cover. Just again, a quick background on ourselves. So from a research perspective, we were really adamant about how important it is to have the pedagogy informing the technology and not having technology for technology's sake. So for us, we've done research, we've collaborated with research partners at Trinity College, LearnInnovate at the EdTech Research and Design Centre there, where our framework for delivering feedback online was built. And we also have a PhD through the School of Education that's running as well. In terms of how we then bring that research and learning into the tools that we work with, we're here today to talk about our integration with Microsoft Teams and partnering with them throughout Ireland and further afield as well. And we've been really proud to be awarded by Social Entrepreneurs Ireland and Rethink Ireland in recognition for some of the work that we've done with the students from those less fortunate backgrounds. We really feel that an EdTech solution could be something that is accessible and available to all, not just to the few. And I think moving forward with the opportunity we have within education today and how technology can drive positive change, we want that to be driving positive impact as well. So if you go back to the very early days, and one of the things that stood out to us when we started was that in an average Irish classroom, there's 25 students to one teacher. That's what makes it a very challenging proposition for a teacher to reach those students on an individual level. Why does that matter? Because students who receive personalized instruction perform better than 98% of traditionally taught students. So that's a compelling statistic, and that's from a Microsoft and McKinsey research piece as well. And if you think of that, it's something that compelling. That's why we try to bring elements of that personalization and making that possible for teachers in the classroom. So our work is a combination of the challenge teachers face with the classroom environment, but also knowing how effective that individualized instruction can be. So bringing it together, and what are we? So this is a personalized feedback program. This is about helping you from a formative feedback and formative assessment perspective. It's how we look to help schools to enable that personalized teaching experience within the classroom environment. The key areas we're going to focus on are formative assessment and feedback. And some of the elements within that we're going to touch on are student confidence, how important that is to effective feedback, and student reflection, how we can help empower ownership for the learners, where they now reflect on their feedback after receiving it, to close that feedback loop, as we call it. And that then feeds into school reporting, because one thing that we found is that assessment and school reporting have become quite disjointed as separate tasks. We really feel that the assessment and feedback should inform the reporting and again reduce that workload on teachers as well. So that's a very quick background to ourselves. I'm going to now hand over to Karen, who's going to give us a bit more on terms of the education transformation framework, and plenty more that she's going to cover as well. So Karen, I'm going to hand back over to you once I stop sharing my screen. There we go.
Thank you. You should be able to see my screen now, hopefully.
You certainly can.
Yeah, so we're going to discuss today a little bit around the education transformation framework. And I suppose, Just again to introduce myself, I am a science and maths teacher. I've been teaching since 2008 and worked in a number of schools across the UK and Ireland, but I'm currently on career break with Microsoft Ireland, and it's a delight to be here today to talk to you about how we can use digital transformation to develop our students and I suppose to support and engage with our teachers as well. I think of all time in our own lifetimes, the statement that we live in an ever-changing world has never become more apparent. We're living in a world that is full of challenges and that we may not know how to solve today. This rate of change, it seems to be accelerating, and so are the complexities and the problems that are to be solved. So at the same time, we still have our education system, and it is really, by and large, rooted in, you know, that Victorian mindset: teacher at the top of the room, students down the back, and that they really are receptacles and that they get a lot of knowledge. But maybe too, we can recognize in our students that they are starting to feel, you know, the stress of the world, that they're becoming more apparent that the world is ever changing. And I suppose when we keep this in mind, it helps to focus us as to why transformation is so important, and that idea that you're always self-reflecting and that there's always self-development. You know, I think we're really lucky as educators because we're really in a unique position. We get to influence and shape the world. We get to take care of the next and our future generations. And I suppose we've really realised now that education is central to helping society to meet these challenges. And this is one of my favourite quotes in education, and it's from Nelson Mandela. And he said, like, education is the most powerful weapon which we can use to change the world. If we look, and this is very briefly about the evolution of work and industry, like in the last 100 years, we've gone from 1920s, a lot of manual work, a lot of labour-intensive work. We can recognise that the concept of work is changing with a move away from the traditional manufacturing jobs, that like technical automation has already begun to replace doing tasks. And now we can see that these tasks as well are beginning to become automated. And now we've even begun to automate breaking down information and translating that digitally and outsourcing this. So when we look at the students in front of us, you know, by the time, and this may not be as applicable to all of you, but when you think by the time today's junior infants enter the workforce, their activities will be substantially different from most occupations that we would recognise now. So what we would like to develop in our students is being able to apply information, be creative, be able to problem solve, to be able to collaborate, manage themselves, and the overall development of the person. And why I've kind of mentioned them couple ideas is something like the education transformation framework can really apply a holistic approach across school-wide transformation. It's based on 4 key pillars here: leadership and policy, teaching and learning, intelligent environments, and school and student success. And why leadership and policy? I'm just going to mention it here. Why is it so important? It's because school leaders are often the people who have the vision and that they will help to begin the digital transformation and also be the ones that's sustaining it throughout its journey. By taking, and I'm going to focus now on the student-centred approach to teaching and learning, by taking this approach to all aspects of our teaching and learning, be that curriculum, assessment, the learning spaces in which our students are engaging with their learning, and in building a focus on understanding and meeting the needs of all our students. With these in mind, we're really able to empower all our students to achieve their full potential. Our student learning, you know, is so important, and we should be able to transition it from, instead of students being the receivers of knowledge that was created by us as adults, you know, we have the option and we have the ability to redesign so much of our curriculum to enable students to focus on what they want to learn, what makes each student unique, be that their interests, their cultures, their learning styles, their experiences, and their challenges. And especially through things like I would have seen myself in my own science classroom things like their CBAs, I got to learn so much about their interests. They might be able to talk to me about, I learned on which surface would a GAA ball bounce the highest. I learned about the immunisation rates in their own cohort. You know, we're able to pull in a lot of the students' own learning. Alongside this, and I suppose never more apparent has it been than the last 18 months, but, you know, and based upon the European Commission of ICT in schools, we know that the most effective use of technology in education combines a strong infrastructure, a motivated teacher, and a supportive environment. You know, teachers can use technology to let their lesson plans drive the classroom, let it drive its setup, and ensure that there's a really engaging and interesting lesson. We all know that assessment is a really essential component of teaching and learning. Providing individualized feedback can significantly help students to engage and stay motivated. We've heard from David there that 98% of students who receive these individualized feedback perform better. You can see that we can use technologies such as the Microsoft tools, such as Go Nurtures, so that, you know, educators can adapt existing assessment strategies, you know, to work in hybrid learning, in-school learning, remote learning, and personalize the feedback to their students. And this will help to keep our students engaged. Moving on then, we know that for school and students to succeed, this has to be anchored in equity and inclusion. Building the staff capacity through professional learning and development, it's critical to ensure that our students develop their social and emotional needs so they can successfully prepare for the future. And while I'm not going to go into all of these areas, I want to talk to a little bit about, I suppose, the opportunity we have, which is, you know, educator development. So we can empower staff so that they access on-demand training in a number of range of ways, so that your institution can continue their development, continue their journey, so that the reflection helps sustain and drives this. And you might find courses on places like the Microsoft Educator Centre. It might be something that you're doing in collaboration with the likes of Go Nurture, so that you're sustaining that staff development and really, you know, empowering teachers to become, you know, models of learners and continuing lifelong learning throughout their experience with their students. Key to all of what we're going to talk about, or when we talk as educators, is the idea that, you know, equal access means that all students of all abilities have the opportunities to learn. With technology, they can use this to be able to access, you know, a number of different pieces of work that they may not be able to do. Things like the immersive reader can help to read things aloud. You can use the translator software and ensure that students who may have found it difficult to access certain learning opportunities can indeed access them and be able to get a full experience of their learning. We know that the research would indicate that 73% of our classrooms have students that have reading ages across 4 years. And we also know that it's approximately the same amount that will include students that have some additional need. So the importance of this is technology can be used to, you know, ensure that the students can become independent lifelong learners. Very lastly, looking at this, we've got intelligent environments, and I suppose we've learned a lot in the last period of time, but the use of information, the use of analytics can be used by the teacher to ensure that we have really strong engagement from our students. We know over the last 10 years and through research in the OECD, we can see that student engagement has dropped. By providing personalised instruction, personalised feedback, we can use this to engage with our students, keep them motivated, and keep them engaged with our classroom. Developing safe and secure on-site and online environments, leveraging data analytics to optimise student outcomes, and create efficient and responsive and sustainable processes can ensure that for us as educators, we can allocate our resources so well in our class, and we can ensure that we're meeting the needs of all of our students. I've really just given you a real taste of what the education transformation framework involves. But if you'd like to learn more about it, I might pop a link in the chat if that's okay, and you can learn more about it here on the Microsoft Educator Centre. If this is something that you're really interested and involved with, just to point out that journeying through this is one of the gateways to the Microsoft Showcase School programme, in which you can engage with like-minded teachers and school leaders around the world. You can always reach out to me on Twitter, but equally you can always reach out to me and the team at Microsoft Education Ireland, be that on Twitter or by that email there, mseduirl@microsoft.com. I'm going to hand back now to David, but thank you for listening to me and learn a little bit more about the ETF.
Super. Thank you, Karen. I appreciate that. And it's really exciting to see, I suppose, just the breadth of support and range of things that Microsoft can bring to the table. And I suppose it's an exciting time for us as an Irish organisation to be able to partner with them as well. I'm very excited now to be able to have a conversation with the principal that we've had a really good relationship since we started talking with Cathnia last year. We're going to touch now on kind of the idea of empowering teachers to deeply care for their students. So as an introduction, and he has quite an introduction as well, so I've had to cut some of this short just in order to keep the time. But Cathnia Ó Muircheartaigh, he's the principal at Coláiste, Pobail, Osraí. He's at the Gael Coláiste in Kilkenny City that falls under the Kilkenny and Carlow ETBI. Cathnia is also a former president of the NAPD, and he's a strong advocate for the role that those representative organisations can play in helping school leadership, and also the role that they play both at regional and at national level as well. As a native of Doon Queen and a fluent Irish speaker himself, he has moved from the area of a larger ball to a small ball in Kilkenny, and not a natural change, I would say, for those from the Kerry area, but a man who really is passionate about education and the Irish language, and really progressive in his thoughts about how technology can improve the teaching and learning of young people. I think that's a really key part of when we will touch on technology in just a moment. So Cathnia, lovely to have you, and it'd be great to have a brief kind of background in terms of the school and your approach at Coláiste, Pobail, Osraí.
Thank you, David. I suppose I was wondering how long it would take you to mention hurling this particular year, but well done anyway. I suppose, as you said, the background, I suppose we're a small co-ed Gael Coláiste in Kilkenny. We are a Microsoft Office 365 and Microsoft Teams school from the very start. We're a one-to-one device school. And I suppose most of our students go on to third level, but we would have a variety of students in the school. I suppose I'm lucky enough that most of the staff, all the staff are fairly proficient with the various platforms, and like most schools managed to transition online very quickly, I suppose, during the pandemic. I suppose I would like to compliment all our second level schools in particular on that transition. I think it was amazing what second level schools did, and I suppose they're not getting, and we're not getting enough kudos for that in the media. So well done to all our second level schools on that. I suppose within the school, I suppose we have a very good pastoral care system in the school. Our students are well looked after in that way. We have one-to-one meetings on a regular basis with all the students. And reports are sent to parents and teachers. I suppose it was during some of those meetings in the early times before the pandemic, it became very clear to me, and I suppose it was obvious before that really, but you know, that students, sometimes a lot of them do not know how to learn or how to study, right? We also felt we needed maybe to tighten our own structures here and to support students in their own learning. So to put some of the responsibility, I suppose, back on them rather than have all the responsibility with the school or with the teacher in the class.
Super stuff. Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting one in terms of, it touches on a point, Cathnia, of that while there's huge challenges faced during the last 18 months, 2 years, there's also a lot of things that we learned we may not have done had we gone through that whole world turning upside down. So I suppose that like, I mean, having the grounding that you have in Coláiste Pobail Osraí of that pastoral care and that actually leading to the identification that maybe there's a gap for the students in terms of that how to learn or how to study. I suppose there's like, that's a really important thing to identify, but also that now looks at how you introduce things to address that. So if we look at kind of innovation when it comes to technology in the school and how you approach that, what do you do when you look at bringing in something new?
Well, look, first of all, I think technology in itself is only a tool, and I think that's the first thing I have to think of, because I like technology and I like using technology, and we have been at the forefront of a lot of those things, but we do need to bring back to basics. You know, we're here for teaching and learning, and technology is only a support for teachers and a support for the learning in the school. I would have a few basic requirements for any software that we use. I suppose number one, that it's easy to use. It integrates with other packages, so that's very important for me. I don't want to have to administer different passwords for different things, so that's very important. And I suppose save time for teachers. I think that's another thing, or in the end at least. I know there's always a learning curve, but in the end, that if it saves time for teachers, and I suppose that it's more efficient, and I suppose ultimately that improves learning and teaching within the school. I think that has to be the key focus.
Brilliant. Yeah.
Sorry.
No, you're right, because that very much echoes ourselves as well in terms of how we're trying to roll out Nurture, and the schools we're working with is very much putting that focus on how this is embedded with the pedagogy behind the scenes, the research frameworks that inform. This isn't just technology for technology's sake. But it'd be good, Cathnia, to maybe talk about an example of maybe a successful rollout of technology you've had within the school, and walking it through the process, because one of the things we're constantly aware of is that you can't ever assume that you're going to have mass buy-in overnight. So how would you approach that as a school leader?
I suppose, well, we'll take an example. Like, so we rolled out Microsoft Teams, or Microsoft Classroom as it was before that, a number of years ago. And I suppose I looked for a group of volunteers, first of all, and set up a group of interested teachers from different subject areas and interests. I would have asked some directly. I wouldn't have, you know, because not everybody volunteers for everything, and you do need to kind of ask people as well. And it's not just those that are interested in technology. So it was good to have a group of people in different kind of subject areas to kind of have that conversation around how it would be used within the classes and everything. Within Teams, then we started slowly. We set up our staff portal. We moved all our communication from group emails, which we would have had before that, onto the staff portal. So if staff needed to know anything, it was all up in the staff portal. We did the same with the student portal. We had all those rolled out, including, I suppose to bring it back a step or two, I suppose we did support teachers in installing Teams, in kind of figuring out how to use it, how to post to it. We set up subject planning areas on that portal as well, so that they had everything, you know, minutes of meetings and everything had to be put up there. So everything was quite simple, and we did ask them to kind of whether they wanted support in utilizing that. With the classes, then we decided to, I suppose, start with 1 year group. It didn't always work out like that. Different teachers wanted to use it with different classes, but we did kind of say, well, we'll start with 1 year group, and that group of teachers. I tried to fit it around the group of teachers we had in the pilot group of teachers, and they went about supporting each other, and then I suppose teaching each other how to use Teams within the class. This, like, it was well up and running now before the pandemic, and now obviously Teams has developed since then, and I suppose a learning curve and the usage of it went up exponentially during the pandemic. There was one good thing came from the pandemic, I suppose. But I think the most important thing I learned from that, from let's say previous iterations of rolling out, whether it was email or whether it was anything else prior to that, is to use teachers, or to ask teachers to show each other what to do. So it was setting up small groups of teachers one-to-one, because people are at different levels and people are at different confidence stages in their own learning and their own teaching. So it was in that one-to-one that it worked very well, you know. So it was a matter of showing them small things, going back to their classes, utilizing within their classes, and then coming back. Like, definitely before the pandemic, we were using, half the teachers were using the Teams with the classes, and we were all using Teams as a staff portal and as a student portal. But during the pandemic, then we were able to set up the classes within, well, they were all set up, so we were able to utilize them straight away.
Brilliant. Yeah, and I think that touches on a really important part, I think, because you mentioned it there, is that starting off, it's about kind of building the comfort levels and the success with the initial group, and then that naturally feeds down to others in the school. So you can, because I think it's very important for in terms of introducing something new at a school-wide rollout, that it's coming from those internally, sharing with colleagues and peer-to-peer, rather than something just from top-down only. And would that be fair? That's
yeah. No, I say one thing I would have to say is that it does not happen overnight, and it does need to be supported. It does need to, but it's a simple enough thing, and teachers want to learn, and if it's worth it, everybody's going to do it, you know. And I would have had teachers coming to me or coming to the other teachers asking how to do this and how to do that. And that's important. So
fantastic.
You know.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And maybe just as we approach the end, Cathnia, because it's something that you referenced at the very start as well, and how, again, that technology is there to support teaching and learning, and not the other way around. So in terms of I suppose, if you look at other elements of teaching and learning that you've seen being impacted by technology in the more recent times, is there any kind of examples or use cases that you've seen that have come up?
In what way? Sorry, David.
I suppose just looking at kind of maybe groups of students that you may look at supporting in different ways, or teacher kind of getting those up to those levels.
I suppose going back to the peer or pastoral care one-to-one meetings, and the highlighting the fact that some of the students maybe didn't learn or couldn't learn or did not know how to study kind of bit. I would also kind of say maybe that teachers, when they're reporting back or giving feedback to students, like, you know, a lot of them give different feedback during the pandemic. Like, I would say that a lot of feedback was given, but we are not sure whether that feedback was read or understood, you know. So that's where it was highlighted for us. That's why we made the move at the time to jumpAgrades, and we have found it very good since, you know. So it's a matter, and we're still only at the start of this as well as everybody else. So but it is important to, I suppose, to instill, I suppose, a learning culture within the school, to put the responsibility back on the students. We can support it, teachers can support it, but if we can put some of the responsibility back on the students to learn and their own learning, then we can all move forward together. You know, I suppose there's oftentimes, I think it's that middle cohort, okay? You know, those kids that are having difficulty will be supported, and, you know, there are a lot of people putting a lot of time into them. The stronger ones we love to publicize, and we love to print in the local paper and celebrate their 625 points or whatever it is. But it's that middle cohort that I kind of look at and say, well, look, we better make sure that they don't coast, because they can hide in the background, and I think we need to kind of give more personalized feedback to them and get their feedback on the feedback.
Excellent. Yeah, no, that's a lovely. Thanks a million for that, Cathnia. It's really helpful to have your perspective as well. What I'm going to do now is actually pass it over to our Director of Teaching and Learning, Stephen Cumiskey. So Stephen will be able to walk through the perspective of the research that's gone into the Nurture platform, and also a brief demo then, so you can see how Nurture lives within Microsoft Teams. Stephen, over to you.
That's great. Thanks, Dave, and thanks, Cathnia, as well, for the really interesting conversations. And it's great listening to really experienced teachers and principals as well, that you kind of see a lot of the same teams coming up again over time. And I hope now in the next couple of minutes, I'll re-emphasize some of those teams and how we at Nurture are addressing some of the issues that you experience on a day-to-day basis as teachers. So just quickly, I'll just introduce myself and my colleague Neve, who's not here today, because we are the teacher and learning team at Nurture. I'm the director of teaching and learning. I was a lecturer in STEM and digital and physics education, previously in the University of Limerick. I was one of the authors of Investigating Science. I did my PhD on the integration of technology in the second level classroom across all subjects, looking at a way to observe the pedagogy and the technology being used in the classroom. And as well, then during my time, my PhD, I was a teacher of science and physics and chemistry and maths for about 5 or 6 years. And just then my colleague Neve then is assistant principal and co-founder of her own social enterprise company, Move to Be. So lots of experience in our team. And what I'll do is I'll just take you through a quick overview of the onboarding that we're currently doing with the teachers who are coming onto the Nurture platform this year. So typically what we do is we go through a 90-minute session, and in that session we do some introductions and icebreakers. We have a discussion on the experiences of formative assessment, because every teacher brings a different view of formative assessment and their own experiences, some really positive, some really negative, and then a lot of people in the middle. We also go through a brief presentation to research on effective formative assessment and feedback, and how Nurture uses this in its platform. And that's the key thing, I think, with Nurture and jumpAgrades, is that Dave and Podge came in straight away and knew that they needed to have this aligned to teaching pedagogies. This wasn't technology for technology's sake. This was something that was really informed from the research and the teaching pedagogies. And then they came up with an innovative way to bring it into a software platform. We normally do a hands-on demonstration and a Q&A session. We then look to organize a feedback clinic with the teachers a month later. So we don't just do the onboarding and leave them to it. We organize to touch base with them a month later to see how they're getting on. There'll be emails sent back and forth if people are kind of flying ahead or maybe lagging behind and want a little bit of help. But that feedback clinic is really when you've got 1 or 2 assignments on your belt to really kind of help you understand the full power of Nurture then. And then also we talked about this new CPD opportunity. So as Karen said earlier on, one of the key pillars is that the school environment is about upskilling, and we are offering upskilling opportunities to our Nurture educators. So the Nurture platform itself incorporates best practices and formative feedback. And while that might sound like some kind of sales jargon, it is actually true. And in the onboarding, we go through a couple of slides around what formative feedback research has actually been put into the framework. And I'm going to just give you a kind of an overview of some of these. So the first thing is we want to focus on why is feedback important. And we know feedback is crucial to the students' improvement of skill acquisition and knowledge. It can be used as a powerful motivational tool. But really the key thing is, and this is something I'm going to give you here because I think it's such a key thing for educators to just be really mindful of when we provide feedback. And that is that the goal of effective feedback is to reduce the disparity between the students' current gap in knowledge and the desired outcomes. And if you want to visualize this, if a student is standing at a river, where they are currently standing is their current knowledge. Across the river is their desired outcomes, and the river represents that gap in knowledge. And we as educators use feedback to build a bridge that students are going to cross that gap. And it's such a simple way to look at it, but I think often just with the administrative burdens that we face and the focus on the juniors and leaving certs, we often forget that feedback isn't just this kind of stick that we use to beat students. It is actually a really powerful tool, and it does have a really specific purpose. And to that end, when it comes to building bridges, there are key features that we need to consider. And in feedback is the exact same thing. And the first and most important is that feedback clearly aligns to the intended goals. So whether you call them success criteria, learning intentions, learning objectives, goals, whatever it is, your feedback needs to clearly align to those goals, because by doing that, you stop students engaging in what's called blurring, where they start blurring the lines between their current gap in knowledge, what they think the question is asking, to what they think you as the teacher are looking for. When you start giving them feedback that aligns to those goals, they start to recognize what they need to do for future assignments. And that also addresses the issue of engagement. So students are more likely to engage, not just with the task, but with the feedback itself, because the feedback clearly has a purpose to them. But then also that perceived gap in knowledge becomes transversal. They can see that they can cross that river. Feedback then should focus on process over outcomes, and feedback should always provide information on where to go next. And this is a key part, and we'll talk about it briefly in the next part, but this is about self-regulation. This is about how do we make these students more autonomous and self-directed. As Connie was saying earlier on, we want the students to take ownership over their learning, and we can actually do that with feedback. And to do that, we look at the levels of feedback. So the research shows there are 3 really key levels of feedback. We've got feedback about the task or task level feedback, feedback about process or process level feedback, and then feedback about self-regulation. So when we talk about the task, we talk about the correctness of the task being accomplished, and we use this correct misrepresentations rather than a student having a gap in the information or a cognitive gap. Then we talk about process level, which is specific to the process underlying the task, and can actually be used as clue mechanism as well. So where we see students using cruxes where they might use the same formulas over and over again, we can offer them solutions or alternatives and prompt them to solve the equation using this different method. But the one here, and I think this is one we often kind of neglect as educators, is about self-regulation. And this is designed feedback to address the interplay between students' commitments, control over their learning, and the confidence that they have. And it is designed to make the student more autonomous and self-directed in their learning. So if you think about it, all the research suggests we should be doing this back in primary school. But if you get students from first year and start providing them information on where to go next, that's self-regulated feedback, by 6th year, they'll be a completely new student. They'll be fully autonomous. They'll be what you expect in 4th year of college, where they're going to the library to find information. They're not waiting for your feedback to go and revise something. They know before you even give it to them what they need to do and how they can achieve it. Now, there's a slide missing there if you haven't noticed, and that's the good stuff that we have that's specific to nurture. So if you want more about that, we can tease you with it afterwards. So what we then do is we go into a hands-on demonstration, and I'm going to just show you, because this is something that is really nice and has been for the last year or last couple of weeks, is that we've now integrated into Microsoft Teams. So I'm going to show you our Teams integration and how it works.
And maybe just while you're loading that up, Stephen, I'll just quickly mention that just for the school leaders that are here today, we have an introductory offer for kind of a starter pack for schools that we'll have a bit more detail on before, but just one that's available for the coming months, and that offer is up until the end of September as well. So we'll share more details on that towards the end, but just so people are aware that those who are part of the conversation today, that's something that can be there for them. And then just passing back over from the demo perspective, I suppose it'd be great to show just the ease of adding the nurture functionality to a Microsoft Teams environment. And then maybe if you just go through the creation of the assignment, Stephen, I can show what the feedback looks like on the other end, and we can obviously do a more deeper dive demonstration with any student who wants to learn more.
Absolutely, Dave, and thanks for that. And as Dave alluded to there, so the ease to which that you can put nurture into your Microsoft Teams environment is pretty much 2 to 3 clicks. So within Teams, you go to the classroom that you're in, you click the tab here to add a tab. My assignments will come up, or if it doesn't appear, you can just type in my assignments. You click my assignments, you hit save, and now you have added nurture into your Microsoft Teams. And that will load all the information from the classroom that you need. So that's how simple it is to put it in. To create an assignment, you know, it's as simple, just with a few extra steps. So all you do is you click new assignment that appeared in the top right. You'll start typing in assignments. So say people in history is one. You give it a description. So we'll say write about a Renaissance. I'm going to just shorten that, Renaissance writer. And what you can do here is, so if you've got students who may have additional needs, such as dyslexia, you can go and you can record an audio. Maybe you have a video uploaded that you want to attach. Maybe you want to take a photo of the marking scheme, or maybe you've created a photo of the different Renaissance writers they can write about. Or you can select a file to upload, be it Word, PowerPoint, Excel, and so on. So you can add in bits here for students. Again, it's great for just differentiation for students with additional needs. Select the date, so we'll say it's due next Thursday. We obviously want to grade the assignment, so we'll just say it's worth 20 marks. So we can go marks, percentages, descriptors. I'm just going to easily say marks. And this is the key thing here. So that point I made earlier on about aligning the feedback to the goals, this is where Nurture's magic really kicks in. So we have to type in learning objectives, and I should have prepared these earlier, but I didn't. So what we'll do is we put in learning objectives, and this is what the students are marked against and what they will receive feedback on. So we'll just say for learning objective 1, it'll be include 10 significant relevant statements or facts about the Renaissance writer. It will be name a specific Renaissance writer, because we know from experience students will write and write and write, but often forget who they're talking about. And then finally, we want them to demonstrate an understanding of the significant relevant statement principle by highlighting, excuse the bad typing, each significant relevant statement. So again, these learning objectives, they're up to you. What we found really interesting actually is a lot of teachers have started doing them for project work. So they'll add in something like this. They'll say communication, or they'll have collaboration. And what they're doing is during the classroom, they're watching out for these and putting in marks. And then when they give them feedback on the assignment, they can give feedback on these skills as well as the content. So this is completely up to you. But the idea here is these learning objectives or goals are what the feedback are going to align to. So you want to make them visible to the student. And that's kind of the assignment ready to go. But as we said earlier on, students have this capacity to look for the grade and not engage with the feedback. So we have a way to make sure that we can close that feedback loop. So we've added in a student reflection. So what we do here is when you correct the assignment and you give them their personalized feedback, we ask the student to then engage with that feedback. So you can simply ask them to engage with an emoji, so they can say they're disappointed with the feedback they received, they're neutral, or they're happy with it, and then they unlock their grade. So that's the withholding the grade part. Or we can do a bit more. We can ask for a 3-2-1, and we can ask for 3 things they learned about, 2 things they found interesting, and 1 question they're left with. And as Karen said earlier on, this bit about finding it interesting and make it relevant to the student, they're offering you this information. So that can be really powerful and impactful in your lessons going forward. And again, 1 question you're left with is a really strong checkpointing tool to see, is there any content you need to revise before moving on to the next part? So all you do then is, so we're going to say, we'll go with an emoji, you hit next, and you assign it to your students, hit assign, and every student gets a notification then. So that's as simple as it is to create an assignment and to send it to all students. And I think, Dave, would you like to take over and show the feedback there, or?
Perfect, yeah. And as we approach the end, your timing has been exceptional, Stephen. So well done there. As we're getting towards the end, so I'll just very quickly kind of bring that all together then in terms of the impact on the students, because ultimately this is about supporting the young people that are in the classroom. So if you look at kind of the output of what that feedback is, so in a way that actually we've made it more efficient for teachers at those key assessment points. And this is what the feedback looks like. And this is what really excites us, I guess, because if you think of the transition that's happening from summative to formative feedback and formative assessment, it's looking at a move away from the traditional 65% needs improvement or 85% keep up the good work, to something that really guides the students on how they can improve and what they've done well. So this is an example of what the output is on the student's end, where you can personalize it at the comment level, something specific to them. You can include a grade again once they've given us their reflection on the feedback. But the idea that a learning objective could be shared amongst a number of students who fell in the same area. So like Stephen mentioned earlier, the time saving kicks in for the teacher, that you're not repeating yourself, but structured in that really research-based way of how is your process, your next steps, and the ability then to be able to include the likes of a voice recording or additional material. And this is kind of the comparison that we have between what would have been done before and the grade and a note on the piece of paper to what's now possible today. That's the bit that really excites us and what we're moving towards. So that's kind of the wrap up for today. Hopefully we've given you enough of a taster of the different elements of what we do at Nurture, but also just want to say a quick thanks again to both Karen and Cathnia for their contribution today. It really does help to have those external voices to help set the scene, I suppose, and give you a perspective from more than just ourselves. Folks, I think we've come towards the end. I will leave it at that for now. Thanks again to everyone for attending, and if there's any questions, please pop into the chat. Thank you so much.